Welcome to A Burium in the Remnant. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Mauser, and today what I want to talk to you about is the Miller-Urey experiment. And specifically, the Miller-Urey apparatus was basically designed by two scientists, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey. They created the conditions in a lab of what they speculated the early environment of the Earth to be to try to prove that natural processes, independent of any type of design or precision or specified complexity, were able to create the conditions of life. Often you'll hear in the discussion that this was the primordial soup, and that the Miller-Urey apparatus basically designed what they said was going to be the ideal environment. Now, think about what they did. The Miller-Urey apparatus designed the ideal environment to create life. How did these two scientists do that? Well, they selected what they thought the early environment was to mix hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and water vapor. And then they shot some of these gases as they circulated the water past a high-energy spark to create some amino acids. And mostly the result was glycine and alanine, but these are mostly organic compounds that aren't in living organisms. There are several problems with the experiment. And if it's not obvious the way I even unpacked the initial thing I said, they use this experiment as evidence against design, against intelligence, against purpose. So you have two scientists who are finely tuning conditions to try to create life, saying that, look, natural processes are able to do this. Time plus chance plus mutations and so forth. This is going to get us life from non-life. Here's three significant problems with the experiment. If the first one isn't obvious, a bunch of scientists sitting in a lab finely tuning an experiment to say that selecting ingredients that are favorable to producing life, saying that this is proof that natural processes did this in their very controlled environment, is the very opposite of what you would need. So the idea that there was an unguided process causing life in an uncontrolled environment is the opposite of the fine-tuning, the intelligence, and the purpose necessary for what they created in the Miller-Urey apparatus with their initial experiment and all the other subsequent experiments. A second major problem is that the early atmosphere did contain oxygen, which is contrary to all these building of life experiments and contrary to what Miller and Urey used in their experiment. So contrary to what they thought the original environment was like, they had to leave out oxygen as part of their experiment because it wasn't conducive for life. But that is actually what was there when they do studies for what was part of the early environment of Earth's atmosphere. There was oxygen present. Of course, the oxidizing effect that we all recognize breaks down things. So that's what causes the rust on your car and things to break down. One of the reasons you use oxidizing agents in your cleaning is to remove these things. So free radicals, which are oxygen floating freely in your blood, tends to destroy your body. So you want to get rid of these free radicals. That is what the early atmosphere had, and that's not what they use in the experiments. Why? Because it's not conducive to life. Here's a third significant problem, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's got a background in biochemistry and some of the origin of life experiments, origin of life debate. And when they are looking at the way that proteins are formed, what you need are a extremely high number of amino acids. And the way that amino acids are formed is there's two different chiralities of amino acids they could have. They're either L or R amino acids. And all that means is the way they're rotating. And with all these experiments, what they have is a 50-50 mixture of those. And the problem with what they have in all these origin of life experiments is to produce life, all of the amino acids need to be L chirality. All the chirality means is the way they're rotating. And so the experiment ultimately is a failure anyways, because not only do different compounds never form life, but because they are always a 50-50 mixture. So you need to have this basically thousands of only L. You need to have 100% of L chirality amino acids in order to produce life. None of them have that. So let me read to you something one of my friends who, as I was discussing this with him, he said, oh yeah, this is very well known in the community that a lot of origin of life scientists are doing work in it. And this is one of the obstacles they just cannot overcome, those who are Darwinists. So all amino acids used by life on Earth, with extremely rare exceptions, are left-handed, L-chiral. This phenomena is called homochirality. It's absolutely essential for functional biology. So the protein folding depends on uniform chirality. Proteins are long chains of amino acids. Now, if the chirality varies, the protein's three-dimensional shape will collapse into disorder. Life only forms from L-form amino acids, which allows for specific stable folding. This is crucial for any protein function. Enzymes and DNA are also chirality specific, and they only use certain types of chirality in their backbone. If there's a mixture of the L and D types, the left-handed and the right-hand, D being for dextro, the right-handed structure, then there's not precision, and basically you lose functionality. So you cannot have life without it only being the L type of amino acids. That's really the bottom line. And all these experiments don't account for this additional biochemical problem. So I know this is probably a little more sophisticated, in depth. Again, I've referred to some resources that you could find. I think Bill Dembski writes some about this. If you want to look more into it, my favorite work where I first encountered it is The Natural Sciences Know Nothing About Evolution by A.E. Wilder Smith. He explains this really well. And yeah, I hope some of this will encourage you and equip you as to some of the scientific background as to why there are huge scientific problems with Darwinism. The attacks that a lot of the mainstream scientists have, they'll say how, oh, this isn't recognized universally by sciences. Again, these are illegitimate appeals to authority. So discard these. This is, at least in science, whatever corresponds to reality is what you should believe. And when experts disagree who are scientists, people with terminal degrees disagree about Darwinism. The attack that, oh, only creationists or people who are intelligent design movement use this terminology. Who cares? What's the argument? What is true? Believe what corresponds to reality. And I think at the end of the day, we could trust God over these opinions of atheistic scientists who assume philosophical materialism, which is basically atheism. They assume naturalism. And naturalism can't account for the design we see, for the information we see, for the irreducible complexity, for the specified complexity, for the chirality. The fact that you need 100% left-handed amino acids for life, and you don't find that anywhere outside of an intelligent designer interceding. So design implies a designer. All right, Bereans, I hope something here has encouraged you. Have a great day.